Okay, we have a couple of people trickling in. Probably wait for a minute or two. Okay, hi everyone. I'll probably give a quick introduction about myself. I'm from the fourth cohort of the Harappa School of Leadership's Accelerated Management Program. My name is Mallika Sridhar. I'm a public policy professional and I currently work with the Godrej Group in the corporate affairs team. And in today's panel discussion, we have two very young, smart, dynamic women with me, Nikhita Nadkarni and Sanjana Govindan Jayadev. I'll give you a quick introduction about both Nikita and Sanjana. Both of them are in the impact investment sector. They have worked across different roles, and Nikita currently is the head of programs and partnerships at Acumen India, and her role involves developing the sector strategy for Acumen's investment in India. Prior to this, she has been working with India's largest and oldest philanthropic organization, the Tata Trust, and she's an MBA from Science Business School. And definitely, we'll come back to you, Nikita, to know a little bit more about your journey in this sector. A little bit about Sanjana. Sanjana currently is the strategy lead for the Women Entrepreneurship Platform set up by Niti Aayog. She was the vice president of Women Entrepreneurship at GAME. And outside of work, she's a published children book writer. She holds a master's degree in public policy from the National University of Singapore, and as a Lee Kuan Yew scholar. Welcome to both Nikita and Sanjana. Thank you so much for joining us today evening, very close to Christmas, close to festivities. Thank you for talking to our cohort, talking to the people around. So, a little bit about today's panel. We'd like to focus a lot more about your journey, the kind of organizations that you have been working with, and there's just so much talk in the last decade about impact investments. So what does really constitute impact? Like, what does the sector look like, and what does it mean to be in this sector? So we probably start with Nikita. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thanks, Malika, and also thank you for the really kind introduction. So I think impact investing or impact investment, I think largely two words. And if you just take a moment to kind of like unearth the two words, right? So very simply, what is impact? So um, taking a step back, maybe I think most for-profit companies generally create financial impact or focus on profit maximization for promoters and shareholders. Impact companies, on the other hand, go beyond that kind of profit maximization, focus on social impact and environmental impact. What that essentially means is that the intentionality of this impact is really crucial. So the impact needs to be essentially ingrained within the model itself and not really be an afterthought. So that way it kind of differs from aspects of CSR or ESG reporting that most corporates need to do. And like you said, what is impact? So essentially it comes down to really who is this impact for, right? And most impact investors and most of us will kind of define it in many different ways. Essentially, impact would need to be for lower income communities or vulnerable populations, but essentially someone who is really like needs or is in need of essentially an access element to either products and services or access to information, access to markets, access to skills or jobs. So essentially, when it comes to really social impact, we say that it needs to be able to improve access, whether it's in agriculture, education, healthcare, financial inclusion, climate, or absolutely anything else. At the same time, it could be even environmental impact. So you have companies that work in, in renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, which essentially focus on, uh, essentially abating carbon emissions, reducing carbon emissions. So that could actually constitute environmental impact. You have waste management companies, you have circular models. So that's really the way to look at kind of impact, I would say. And purely investment, which is the second word, I think is about really business. So essentially having all the elements of any business that you would have, right, from a strong business model, like unit economics, commercialization potential, um and so in terms of like all of the different things, you would have like, you would start right at the investment thesis. You would have all the aspects around like lead generation, deal sourcing, due diligence, investment structuring, portfolio management. I think all of the other things that you would have in any kind of an investment process. Just one difference I'd like to call out is, I think what's really crucial is the impact measurement and kind of management process and the learning process, which I think is a key differentiator in the impact space, because it's constantly about tracking, measuring, monitoring, and communicating that that impact you're able to create to your investors and to your funders, so that to showcase how that metrics goes beyond your financial returns. Yeah,
Thank
so I think that's just a way to kind of summarize impact investment in like the simplest of terms.
Thank you so much, Nikita. This is really interesting. Also know this because we have previously done some amount of work with Social Alpha in this space, and now that you're doing that in Acumen. So Sanjana, just coming to you, your experience with social venture partners, also supporting different organizations in different sectors. Would love to understand how have you defined impact in the kind of roles that you have been working in, particularly for enterprises that you support.
Firstly, thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here. Nice to have Nikita. All girls panel is always my favorite. And for everyone joining us on a Friday evening, happy holidays. So I'm going to take a telescopic view on picking up on what Nikita said. Just to say, you're absolutely right. Everyone's thesis on what impact means is so different. But there's also a couple of, I'll talk about it this way. There's a couple of operational things around impact investing, which are different than all other funds. For example, the time horizon for an impact fund is typically 7 years versus a regular fund, which would be in the 5 to 6 years. The expectation of return, financial return from investors, is also significantly lower, sometimes different. The structure in which it is made is different. It can go back into a fund. It is revolving sometimes. So those kinds of mechanics have also evolved over time. And now I think the latest entrant into this sort of impact space is the social impact bonds, right, which everyone's sort of figuring out. So in my head, just the amorphous nature of the instrument and the idea of impact investing also makes it a great enabler of innovation, which is what it actually is supposed to be. So in my mind, all the work that I've done across enterprises, impact capital has provided three important roles. The first is whether it's a nonprofit or a social enterprise, it all comes down to what part of my business model can be monetizable so that I'm self-sustaining while I continue to serve the most vulnerable person or members of our community. So that's usually the first part. And impact investing oftentimes fits that bill. The second is, you also touched upon the fact that you require business processes and services. And my experience has been that every time we've tried to fit a market-based solution to a social enterprise or a community that is vulnerable, in the absence of business type of processes, it's always been hard to scale those solutions. So you can make that, we've always seen there'll be small successes, anecdotal or tactical wins, but for that to scale at massively and become a system or a movement has always required a little bit of that business integration. And that's where this type of capital helps. And I think the final piece is, and I've seen this so much, especially in the intersection of gender and enterprise, the ability to lobby, convene, to change the narrative is oftentimes only pushed forward because you have some form of heft and capital. And unfortunately, it's businesses and not nonprofits that are able to set the agenda and do that. We've seen that with the NBFC sector, but we've not seen that with women banking, because we've not been able to find a coherence around what does it mean for all of us to get on the same page, ask for the same thing, because there's no money involved. So I think these are some of the additionalities to the way I would think about impact investing and its value. But for me, impact capital is a broader definition. It also includes philanthropic funding. It includes all types of catalytic capital, which covers this whole gamut of bonds, of revolving grants, and things like that. And I also think there's a big stakeholder in the room we often forget, but one of our most interesting impact investors is actually the government. And we don't think of it in that traditional sense, but they've set the agenda, the rules, regulation, and they're also making bets. And so my experience over the years at working with the Red Cross, where we did a significant amount of work with Social Alpha actually, was how does impact investing help build the market for a product or service whose time has not yet come or is about to come? In many ways, the thesis on how can I build the rails? So in that case, even the government sort of makes these huge investments in a space, maybe it's green energy, solar, and then the signaling effect brings everyone else to the marketplace. So I think our traditional definition of an impact investor is someone who sits in a boardroom and makes these decisions top down. I actually think some of the best funds and investments that I've seen and I've been part of have been very bottom up. They've come from a place of innovation, and they've also come from this horizontal recognition that power structures are very different in impact funds versus venture funds. In impact funds, the power structures are so much more about co-creation and how can we grow together and get to that point where we see impact socially, but we also see monetary return. But it's not like that with any other model. And I think that's probably the best part about it. So I'll pause here. I'm happy to hear more questions.
Thank you so much, Sanjana. This is super interesting and also segues into our next discussion. I'll sort of pause here and encourage our group that has joined us to ask any questions. Please put it on Q&A. And yeah, we would love to hear questions from all of you. And we can pick it up during the discussion or right after. So yes, please go. Please encourage you to do that. So yeah, just taking off from where you left, Sanjana, I think what was really interesting that you mentioned is the whole co-creation part, and which is what we largely hear about organizations that we all have worked across. So just want to also understand what kinds of capital are really available. You mentioned a little bit about government playing a huge role, and you spoke about Red Cross and philanthropic capital being available. How are these usually deployed? What are the kind of capital that social enterprises can really avail to really scale up? How do they usually think about that right kind of mix, and who do they really approach when they want to sort of co-create and grow and scale up? What's the right model? I mean, what's the right fit according to you?
So this is possibly a conversation I have most frequently, the fundraising conversation. And if you talk to anyone in the social sector, they'll say it's the dirtiest word in the social sector, but it's also the most interesting one, the type of capital, because it defines so much of your business model, your legal structure, and especially in the environment that we operate in, how compliances are executed, etc. I think I'd break it down into my observation is there are three types broadly of buckets of capital. There's the traditional donor money, Tata Trusts, individual donors, HNIs, philanthropic foundations, institutions. And that money often goes into serving a population where there is no marketable model to solve for that problem. It's oftentimes children with terminal illness. It's very low income communities that need to be moved up into higher levels of economic delta, and there isn't a monetizable model. And that capital is absolutely vital, because in the absence of that, you don't even get to a point of a baseline of trying anything. And that capital also helps you try out models that could potentially work and build a thesis for a different type of segment that we don't know. The second type is very much what Nikhita works in, which is the space of this hybrid of catalytic capital, which is it sort of rotates because there's a return on it and there is a clear monetizable pathway. And it's also serving needs and through innovations that do not exist currently. And that's oftentimes a big differentiator. We've seen this in the solid waste management. We see this in a lot of things around femtech. And that is a growing space, which is really important. The final type of capital that I see is leveraged capital, which is a combination of institution, government, philanthropic. And I've seen it in so many different combinations. For example, somebody wants to create a fund to guarantee some to another population. It'll be a philanthropic donor acting as a guarantor. It'll be the government maybe administering the fund. It'll be a non-profit or a social enterprise executing it. And so this third group is a very amorphous and evolving group. And what's great about it, it's also that place where maximum experimentation at scale is possible. And this group has no formula. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because we have professionals from all sectors here. There isn't a specific skill set or that you walk into it. You walk in with a mindset of, I'm willing to figure out how this will work. There is different mechanics within which it will operate. But my core goal is that I want a blueprint for impact at scale. And I can demonstrate or execute through this third type of capital. If I had to think of concrete examples, if you look at Jivika in Bihar, it's a government SHG funded heavily by Gates Foundation and of course executed on the ground by so many partner nonprofits and social enterprises. My own work with the Red Cross and Social Alpha was about how do you build the market for assistive tech in a country where it's growing and the target addressable market is huge, but you're not really thinking about what those mechanics could look like. And then in the philanthropy and donor side from SVP and those experiences, it's really just about placing bets and understanding segments and rural tie-off, but making bets trickle-down effect.
Thank you so much, Sanjana. This is so comprehensive. Probably go to Nikhita and just understand a little bit more about what Acumen does. How do they look at investments in this space? What are the different kind of mixes of capital do they look at, or what is purely their model? We also have a question from one of our panelists, and maybe Nikhita, you would like to take this since you mentioned, in the beginning, this is from Tejasvi. She asked that, is there any specific post-investment M&E measurement metrics for impact investing as compared to other investments like venture funding? Also, have you faced any particular challenges while carrying out M&E for impact investment projects? And this is something that I know you mentioned, Nikhita. I would love to know if Acumen is already doing this, or is there some better way that this can be incorporated within the impact investing sector? Yeah.
Sure.
Over to you.
Thanks, Mallika. I think a little bit about Acumen, just as in to give a quick introduction. So Acumen is essentially structured as a nonprofit. We're a nonprofit based in the United States. We use the patient capital approach to invest into for-profit enterprises in India. For-profit enterprises that are early stage have, are extremely high on impact, are really trying to disrupt the space that they're working in. And these sectors could be largely agriculture, working especially with smallholder farmers and with a very clear focus on women farmers. So that's a sector that we operate in. Another sector that we operate in is essentially in workforce development and dignified jobs. So essentially in the sector where you have huge amounts of informality, such as waste, construction, domestic work. So these are sectors where you wouldn't see traditional commercial capital coming in, but also not the other sort of mainstream impact investors really working in. And the third sector that we work in is clean energy, but it's ensuring how clean energy can actually improve livelihood opportunities. So essentially access to decentralized renewable energy to improve livelihood options. So those are the three sectors that we work in. Acumen is an early stage investor, like I said. So we come in at typically the seed and the pre-series 8 stage. And I think Sanjana mentioned somewhere, long-term horizons are like 12 years. So, we're really patient in that sense. We're willing to take that risk. So in terms of capital, we typically do equity capital or quasi-equity capital, but we've also done debt in the past, long-term debt in the past, but we've also done more recently a few places where we've come in, so blended models where we've come in as, either to come in as to give some sort of security or ensuring we're able to kind of do some sort of interest subvention for NBFCs that we've worked with. So that's typically the kind of work that we've done, but pure play our work is in equity, early stage equity investments. So coming to M&E, right? M&E or impact measurement, impact management, whatever you want to call it, I think that is really the core of a lot of the work that we do at Acumen, because at the end of the day, we are ourselves a non-profit. So we want to be able to go back to our funders and kind of say that, hey, look, the money that you've put into us has yielded not just financial returns, which can be circulated back to the kitty, but also really the impact that it's able to create on the ground. So it really starts with the theory of change or the investment thesis, as you say, right in the beginning. So it's not really what happens post-investment, but really right at the beginning, do you align with the thesis? So to give you an example, if you're working in like the clean energy space for livelihoods, so as we call it, the PUR ecosystem, right? But productive use. Sorry. Yeah, the whole productive use of renewable energy kind of state. So we'll really have like impact metrics laid out right in the beginning to say, what's the, how many number of people you're going to be able to work with, what's the income improvement potential, what's the, carbon emission reduction potential, so along with all of your business metrics, you'll have that up front. And right through your pipeline generation, due diligence, and investment process, that's really where you'll be ensuring that all of the growth plans that you have, all of the business plans that you have align with the impact that you've stated upfront. So it's as you scale, it's not just the business that you're able to scale, but it's also the scaling of the impact. So as you grow, the communities also kind of are able to manage and scale their impact. So are you able to manage and scale their impact? So it starts upfront, not really at the post-investment stage. So that's one one myth that I'd like to bust. The other piece is, of course, there are different ways in which impact investors capture impact. So we use something called the lean data study, which is where we work closely with our sister concern, which is 60 decibels, where we really try to capture impact directly by listening to the customer voice. So who better than the people who are using your products and services to tell you whether they appreciate them or not. So we use the lean data methodology to kind of validate impact and continuously validate impact. So we'll have a lean data study which we'll do pre-investment and post-investment, and then we'll actually track that and kind of ensure how is it actually getting built into the scale-up journey of the organization. So that's really a way in which we manage impact. Of course, there are many ways. Yeah. There are many different ways, of course. I mean, we have a typical annual review process and you have external studies, but I think the one thing that really stands apart is really just listening to the voice of the customer. So yeah, hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much. There are a couple of other questions, but I mean, this is such a new sector for everyone. Some really interesting questions that are coming about, and I'll leave the floor open before we go into more structured discussion. Is there any way that people like us can invest in any of the enterprises that you support, Sanjana, Nikhita? And is there all of these investment data available anywhere, particularly for these early stage startups or social enterprises? Is that something that is out there or no, or is it still very closed rounds? As far as I remember, very closed rounds of investment. They really do not dilute their capital at this point or their investment. So yeah, just want to understand how you look at it.
My experience with small social enterprises has really been because you're plugged into the ecosystem. I get a lot of inbound requests for small checks. And usually these ticket sizes are anywhere in the range of like 3 to 5 lakhs to get started. And that's, I think, just a function of finding the areas that you're interested in and being involved in that segment. So I think my learning has been, if you're really interested to make a portfolio in the social sector, one is in the social impact investing sector, one is to actually get to know founders and talk to them. Because oftentimes, one of the best things I've found is a founder will probably tell you, like, listen, I'm not raising money or I'm not the right organization for you, but I know you like this and I know you can add value to this type of organization. So they will connect you to perhaps someone else. The other is, of course, networks like SVP and HNI networks who are actively thinking about how to invest and support organizations that are finding parts of their business models to monetize. So these are really early stages. Some of the businesses that I've seen, for example, Mitti Cafe, right, which everybody knows now. I saw Mitti Cafe at a point when they were a pitch deck, when it was literally here's what I'm thinking of doing. And then we actually co-create to say, let's figure out how to operationalize this idea and bring some of the smartest people in the room. And then there's also the added benefit of, you're not just putting in money, you're also bringing in network, infrastructure, access to other things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Sanjana's covered most of it, right? Like, you obviously have these networks, you can come in as an angel investor, but also I think we're starting to look at the whole social stock exchange piece. So, I mean, as and when it's kind of fully operational, and we'll get to see more of, very interesting nonprofits and companies actually getting listed on that. I would think that just one thing to add there, right? Like, I think what's really critical is, I mean, not critical. I mean, what ends up happening is every few years there are these certain, so to say, sectors that really get a lot of focus. So maybe like 10 years ago it was edtech. A few years later it was agri-tech, and
Agri-tech,
years
then
later it's now probably like climate
green
tech,
tech. Yeah, climate tech. Yeah.
climate tech or whatever. So I think there's always this, I keep saying it's the flavor of the season, but those obviously companies also, from just looking at from the enterprise end, right? It's always easier for companies in that sector to get more funding. So if there is someone with capital and wanting to look at certain sectors, I think the idea is to go beyond those few sectors that are getting that capital to really look at, sectors which don't get that capital. So I think angel investors are probably the best route, especially for early stage, because it's not just capital, it's also the networks that you can kind of like leverage.
Thank you so much. These were questions.
Just had one point to your previous question, which was, is there a place to track this data? And I'm sure, Nikhita, this is a great source of frustration for you also. There isn't. There isn't like a solid deal flow like we have with the for-profit sector, like a traction I can go to and say, hey, sector, what's going on? It's so closed, unfortunately, and it also so network driven, which is also why, unfortunately, a lot of great ideas are struggling to find capital and advice and mentorship. And so one of the things that you, as someone thinking about the sector, or anyone in the audience, is breaking that hegemony by just expanding the types of people involved. The more diverse that network is, the more robust it becomes. So I'll just put that there. Or a business idea would be to figure out a way to have deal flow on all these ideas. That'll help a lot of investors thinking about this space.
Yeah, thank you. This is super interesting and really sort of opens up discussion about being involved in the sector in very different ways, right? And these questions are from Abhishek, who's watching us live on LinkedIn. We also have Anusuya, who's also a cohort learner, and these questions are from different kinds of people from all across walks of life. So I'll sort of now come to the sort of final segment of our discussion, and this sort of culminates from all that Nikhita and Sanjana, both of you, have shared. So just going back to Nikhita, you mentioned about a little about how the sector has evolved, and what does impact really mean. But as per your background, you've been in the financial services sector for a long time. You've done an MBA, and what is your view about making an entry into such a sector? How do you feel about being in this space for such a long time and creating that kind of impact? What really drives you? So very keen to understand. I think there are a lot of learners who are very young and who are making those career decisions. Some of us who are at a juncture who are also making these decisions, and really feel that the sector sort of accumulates skills from across the board. Really love to hear your experience on that.
Sure, thanks, Mallika. So I think firstly, my entry into this sector, I would say, was quite serendipitous, right? Like, I did not choose to be in impact investing, or let alone like the impact sector. Like, I don't think I ever thought I'd be here. So I actually did a traditional kind of bachelor's degree in commerce. I ended up at Ernst & Young, working in financial services for about 5 years. Clearly not enjoying the work that I was doing, but I knew it was paying well and I was doing well at work and all of those things. So I think what really happened was I actually got a chance to work on a project where I was actually doing financial analysis for a World Bank project. And that's the first time I actually got to go to the field and really do a little, I mean, it was a very small field component, but that's really when it hit me. And I think there was like this whole existential crisis where I was like, okay, I'm really not sure what I want to do, and if this is what I want to be continuing to do. And that's really where I kind of introspected and realized that I really wanted to add value through my work. Like, I really wanted my work to make a difference in the lives of people and communities who were just, were less fortunate or whatever. And that's something that really drove me. And that's really why kind of, took a 360-degree jump from financial services consulting to Tara Trusts and philanthropy, and then kind of like, Social Alpha, where we work together, and then now with Acumen. I think the one thing that's been kind of, what's motivated me is just knowing like what is it that I feel really truly passionate about, right? And that for me is, I think, the whole idea of livelihood. So I always feel like, people are super passionate about education or healthcare or whatever else, but for me, I think livelihoods is that one thing that really clicks, because I feel like economic stability, you're able to actually create that resilience that people need. That actually leads to better work, dignity and empowerment. All of that follows when you're able to link people to that livelihood. So whether it's farmers, whether it's informal workers, whether it's micro entrepreneurs, I think that livelihood component really kind of works. Something that drives me, and that's really that's been like, I think, that one thread that's run through Tara Trusts and like later with Social Alpha and now with Acumen. But I think, like, to be honest, there's no one single career path. Like, I work with a team where someone's an ex-lawyer. I mean, someone's a lawyer, someone's an ex-iBanker. My boss is an ex-entrepreneur in nothing to do with impact. I work with enterprises, with entrepreneurs who are like, who are techies, or for that matter, come from a traditional nonprofit sector, who kind of made that switch into the business side of things. So I don't think there's one set journey. I think to each, everyone creates their own unique path. Each one of us brings in like our own strengths into the space. Our skills kind of continue through all of the work that we do. So I think it's an exciting amalgamation, to be honest. I think one thing, if I could say, is that one thing that you really need to be able to chart out a career in this sector is really empathy. I think empathy is super, super crucial. Just being able to listen to the communities, to be able to really, and I think Sanjana mentioned that somewhere. It shouldn't ever be about top down. It should really be about what is it that the community wants and needs, and then kind of driving, whether it's a program, whether it's an investment structure, whatever it is, right? Whatever work that you're doing in the space, I think in the impact space, whether it's you're in non-profit, or whether you're in philanthropy, or whether you're in impact investment, I think the one thing really crucial is having that empathy in place. So I think that's really the ingredient to like a successful career in this sector, is what I would say.
Thank you so much, Nikhita. This is really amazing. We have one question in the Q&A box, but we'll probably just go to Sanjana and hear her thoughts about what really motivates her. She does so much, even outside impact investing and supporting social enterprises. She's deeply motivated in creating a change in the lives of people, in improving the lives of animals and people around us. So I would really love to know, Sanjana, what motivates you and to continue working in this space. Also, given that we are an all women panel, would love to know your thoughts on how have you seen women entrepreneurship developing over the years?
Thank you. Great question. And Nikhita, I absolutely love your answer. I think you hit the nail on its head when you said empathy is literally what brings everyone, or lets everyone stay. My journey, actually, so I won the lottery in many ways, because pretty early in my life, I knew that there was only one thing I wanted to use my intelligence for, and that was, I'm able-bodied, healthy, and in every sense privileged, and that recognition is a very sincere one. So I just decided from take a scholarship. My mother told me, for whoever you want to rescue or help, and I think that's an important one, and it's a luxury to be able to take that decision. So I have only ever worked in the social sector, and I also want to caveat that for most people who are listening to this, you already know this, but it comes with significantly suboptimal everything. Salaries for a long time, you will be making significantly lesser than all your peers. You'll probably not see the inside of a 5-star hotel in a work context ever, unless you're at some conference 20 years later and things like that. But the amazing thing about being in the social sector for me, and I've been here 15 years running now, is that the kind of problems that I have been able to flex on have been things I don't even imagine would exist. Solutions to trafficking of children and where they even come from. Working in the social sector is like this incredible window into human behavior, the markets, and you get to flex and find solutions that no one's really thinking about. It is an utter privilege to be able to use my intelligence in that context, and so that's why I stay. I also stay because I think it's the more we all see our planet going to hell and all of that with climate change and everything, you realize that the only way to be a part of a sustainable solution is to actually be part of creating some of it. And so I continue in that space. I say all of this because it's my hope that, there are so many women in the social sector, but there are not many women leaders in the social sector. You will see them at lower and management levels and then closer to the top, and you do start seeing the disappearance of it, and similar problems persist across. And so it's a concern, a growing one. In the context of the work that I do, so I spend a lot of time. My personal thesis is that you are only strong as your weakest link. And I always believe building solutions for the most vulnerable segment is generally a catch-all for everyone. So my chosen areas are disability and inclusion, women, of course, and I'm very passionate about enterprise. Like Nikhita, I believe that having income in your hands can change the story of an entire household, especially when it's in the hands of a woman. We've seen the multiplier effects. I mean, there's no great chicks in talking about it. But so I've picked these spaces and I've doubled down on them over the years, both on the enterprise side, on the solutioning side, on the policy side as well, because unfortunately, the convening power and the ability for these segments to sometimes lobby for themselves is limited because of access to networks, because of how the loudest voice generally cannibalizes conversations. And the loudest voice is often not the most vulnerable and marginalized individual. It's the most robust in the room. So I've taken it upon myself to do those things. And what keeps me going is that I'm still fighting the good fight. and that is enough. So that's all from me.
Thank you so much. This is really wholesome, and I mean, yeah, these are points that go beyond the usual skills of, oh, do I need to understand how can I do cash flows, can I do this and that, can I do deal sourcing, do I need excellent communication skills? I think empathy and fighting the good fight, fighting for a cause, fighting for the most vulnerable. I think these are such wholesome takeaways from this conversation. Thank you both. We have a question in the chat box, and we will take that. Before we close, I would encourage all the participants. If you still have any questions, please put it out there. This is a question from Monica Shukla from Let's Endorse. So this is open for both of you, Sanjana and Nikhita. Over the last decade, blended finance is literally being termed as catalytic capital for bold ideas for sustainable development. It is eventually just a structuring approach and not an instrument in itself. There has been a number of bodies of work created on how such structures could operate, but we hardly see any bespoke, DIVs or SIVs being tried out, barring a few examples. What is deterring investors from trying this more often? If this is an innovation, it is moving at a really slow pace, scarily slow pace. I would love to know your take on it. I remember that Trust was still experimenting with DIV.
Yeah.
Yes, but yes, this is actually very interesting to know how this is being looked at.
Yeah, I'm sure Nikhita has a detailed answer, but if I can just take a quick stab at it. Hi, Monica, nice to see you here again. We know each other from past lives. But so here's the thing. I don't think it's moving scarily slow, and I don't think it hasn't worked. I think in the social sector context of some of the things that we're talking about, it's always brought up in the context of gender financing, agri-financing, etc. It's moving scarily slow there. But whenever I've looked at like mainstream, look at NBFCs, and the way they are leveraging catalytic capital, the pace is incredible. There'll be like a 400 million grant, Rabobank will underwrite it, Sammunati will disperse it. And these are happening at record speed. My sense is that just the inability of a lot of the other groups who need this financing to lobby, to come together and coherently message the sector, that seems to be absent, and that's really why it's moving slowly. But that's just my outside-in perspective. I'm not the expert. So Nikhita, over to you.
Also, I'm not the expert, but also, hi, Monica. We also know each other through our past lives. So, basically, I think Acumen perspective, to keep it very simple, we've tried a couple of blended models. We've tried a couple of things in the skill space where we've tried to, I wouldn't call it a DIB, or I wouldn't call it a social impact bond. I'd say more a sort of a guarantee piece that we've tried to do. We've also tried to do another one in the whole kind of lending space, and especially getting NBFCs to lend to a section of people in the construction industry, like the subcontractor in the construction industry, where it's all cash, like kind of getting them to move to, helping them with working capital so that they can move to kind of, non-cash payments and move to kind of either, more digital payments. We've tried a bunch of those things. They've been very small, Monica. And again, I think also Acumen, from a capital perspective, we can only, like, we have only a certain portion of capital that we can allocate to some of these, so to say, pilots or experiments. Some of them have worked, some of them have given us incredible learning. So we've tried those different things. Why hasn't it scaled? I know it's scaled in certain cases, like Sanjana mentioned. I think there are huge kind of examples of where this is scaled. I don't think it's scaled in some of these niche areas, and I think that's really where it's about stakeholders coming together. I want to also, like, I could also pass this off saying there are a lot of restrictions on different kinds of players in this space to be able to do anything that's very innovative. So it's really about structuring and going to the right, getting the right, and it takes a lot of time to structure some of these, at least, I mean, from an Acumen perspective, which is domiciled in a different country and kind of trying to do, innovative things in India. I think it's difficult. I wouldn't say it's easy. It takes time, but we've done that in the past, and we hope to do more. But it also comes from, I think just finding the right projects, and also like having the right kind of capital to be able to allocate towards some of these.
Thank you so much. This is great. And I think with this, we will sort of close the panel discussion. I would really like to thank Sanjana and Nikhita for taking out time on a Friday evening, like I mentioned. I would like to tell our panelists, people who are watching across YouTube and LinkedIn, please feel free to write to us. If you have any questions for Sanjana or Nikhita, we'd be happy to share that with them. They'd be happy to answer. They'd be happy to look at interesting ideas as well. I'm talking on their behalf. I'm sure that is something that they're always happy to support, being part of very leading organizations in the impact investment sector. So any last questions? If there are any, we'll quickly take that. Otherwise, we close the discussion, and we'd like to wish you a very happy weekend and a good Christmas weekend. Thanks a lot for your time. And
thank you, Mallika. This was great. Thank you, Nikhita.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was lovely.
Such a great conversation. Well done. All right.